All right, let's jump into round two of our demo with drawing John. And one thing I've got now is my proper measuring stick. So it's a long, skinny, straight metal rod. And I can use this to check angles as we go along. And I have, just to remind you, I've ghosted out the drawing with a big fat bristle brush. And that way there's no dark lines for me to try to contend with as we move forward. So off to the left side of the drawing, I have my screen with the video footage of John posing. And I'm going to just now take the drawing a little bit further and start to just block in the drawing with a little bit more specificity of shapes and angles. And see if we can get a little bit further along in clarifying and arriving at specific placements of features and proportions. But continue to keep it really light-handed. We don't want to press too hard. And keep everything in straight angles. This will help us to really arrive at the proper shape of everything in a quick manner and in an accurate way. And so anytime you have an angle, you can always hold up your measurement stick and see if you got the correct tilt. The beauty of that is that even if it's in the wrong place, at least your angle is correct, and you don't have to change the angle. You change the location, but you don't change the angle. And we can keep things really broad and simple right now, like for instance, the top of the mustache. Ultimately, it's going to have more angles to it, but by and large, we can simplify it to one long straight. And we can appreciate the tilt of that and the length of that. And those are the two really important elements of that shape, at least for now. Try to avoid just branching out from one particular thing, but try to keep the drawing evolving at an even rate throughout the whole portrait. So I'm going to move up here and sort of expanding outward from the center a little bit. Looking at the bag of the eye, the tear bag. As a shape. And here's where we want to start to look at the distance from the bottom of the tear bag to the top of the nostril, and just how close do we want to be to some of these shapes here on the side of the nose, side of the nostril, and the nasolabial furrow. It gets pretty darn tight in there. The distance from the bag of the eye to the nasolabial furrow. Very small, really tight spaces. And so that helps control a very commonly occurring problem where really where the eyes float too far above where the bulb of the nose is, and we just end up stretching out the face really quickly because of that. So, as you know, that's a space that I like to really go for and to control the length of the face overall. It's looking like if I do commit to the bag of the eyes being there, that the eyes themselves would need to maybe go up a little bit. So the nice thing about having the eyes as a blur, we can just easily shift that up with no big deal. Just moving those up. Scoot the brow up by adding a little bit of width to these lines. Very easy to make these kind of edits right now. And it's nice because we sort of have a blur of the face coming into being, and it feels starts to feel like the model more and more as we get closer to the arrival of certain shapes in certain positions. You might notice I am starting to pick up a little bit on some of the Terminator edges, like this cast shadow is a nice shape for me to work with in conjunction with this crease in the face. And looking at this crease in the face, it gives me a lot of nice puzzle pieces to work with. And now a Terminator here, the big Terminator moving down the side of the cheek that connects up with the one in the forehead. That's going to be a very important plane change for us. But we can use it here to help find proportions in the face. Where is this relative to the nose? It looks like for me I'm having it lower than the septum. So I can hold up my measurement stick like this and see if that's consistent with what I'm seeing on the model. So yeah, this point on the Terminator should be a little bit lower than the septum is. So we just keep everything real broad and really in play for a while here. I'm going to use this plane change, this line that sort of delineates generally where the highlight takes place here. And just keep it a straight line for now. And we'll just look at the angle of that and keep it as a real generality. Looks like I was a little bit off, so I can make that a little more horizontal. And notice the pace is slow, careful, thoughtful, just considering what our next move will be each time and how each time we make a statement in the drawing, it affects the information around it, or how it affects the information. Does it necessitate a change or an edit? Probably it will, so be prepared to discover things. Like now that I have the septum here and I start to have some shapes coming in here, as I come into the area of the mustache, I think that I'll see that the mustache here needs to be a little taller. And so we'll be pushing the opening of the mouth a little lower. That will push the lip a little lower. The mustache could move down. There's an example of having the angle correct, but the wrong location for the line. So we just echo it down at a lower location, and it all works. Even the old line seems to contribute to the drawing. Let's look at the Terminator down the nose. So we're looking at the angles of the shadow edge and the puzzle pieces they describe. And with John, the bulb on the nose is really enormous. So the greater alar cartilage, really big and tall. All of the space, alar cartilage, really, really much larger than average. Let's note where the crease is at the top of the bridge of the nose. Where is that relative to the eyes? So it's a little bit above the eyes. So we want to notice what kind of step down do we have to make. If we move the eyes up, then we want to also shift that line up. So that line is sort of on the move right now. And if that's there, where are the brows in relationship to that line? Thinking about the Terminator up the forehead here. Some of the shapes of the shadow. What angle, what tilt is this line as we go up the forehead with this Terminator? Be careful to note as you move into the top of the head, there's a substantial amount of reflected light coming off the wall and the ceiling coming into his head. But we should be able to navigate around this time. We can see that there's reflected light coming from here. The top of the head receives some of that reflected light, but it doesn't violate or distort the fact that it is a shadow. So we can clearly navigate our way here through the difference of light and shadow. It's really helpful to analyze the math behind the angles sometimes. Like if I were to just draw this at first glance, I might make all kinds of mistakes in assuming the orientation of these lines and the tilt of these lines. But if I just isolate this facet on his head, I suddenly realize that it's like an 1130. And then this moment, as we come down to the ear, if I look at it and think, what is the tilt of that line on the clock, I can see that if I hold up my stick to the screen, it really is a 12 o'clock line. So for a moment, that's perfectly vertical. Then it's like an 11:30. And then if we look at this facet on top of the head, it's much more like 9:45 or something. Best way to trap in a curve with accuracy is to translate it into a series of angles. 1, 2, 3, rather than just drawing the curve. If we just draw his head as a curve, we'll end up with a neutral curve. We'll end up with a circle or a sphere. And we know that the figure doesn't do that. The figure doesn't have neutral curves like that. So we want to really capture the specificity of this curve. That means we need to translate it into a series of straights. So look how many I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for now. And that way I'm isolating these moments where there are peaks on the curve. I mean, we could also inflate this and probably put a peak somewhere along there, but it seems to be closer to being flat from there to there. So you want to make it as flat for the longest period of time that you can. The longest period of time that you can make it flat without making it look unnatural. So we're aiming for naturalism, but we're aiming for the geometric analysis at the same time. There's a little trick here, a little confusing thing here, which is the cast shadow of the head. We can see that the beard has a form shadow, but also is a little bit of a cast shadow from the larger head blocking the light and spilling down off the side of the beard. And if he was not wearing a black tank top, if he had nothing on or a white shirt, we would see the cast shadow goes up and over his shoulder, right at the location of where that tank top cuts across. So the tank top is simultaneously the edge of the shirt, but it's also where the cast shadow of his head would fall across his shoulder. And then it'll be intercepted by the terminator of the form shadow cutting across the muscle of the deltoid, the muscle of the shoulder. So we're seeing a terminator in terms of a cast shadow here, and then a terminator in terms of a form shadow edge on the shoulder here. How much lower is this than this? So we want to think. Look at the steps of this to this. Try to assess what the step is there to there. And then what happens on the other side? There's a feeling that the cheek, even though it is covered by the beard, seems to, the rhythm of it seems to come down and intercept, plug into the dark area of the mustache. There's sort of a link of this to this. And we can feel the egg volume of the head. We still feel it turning under the roundness of the egg. We feel it continuing all the way up to this punctuation. So this punctuation is a very important moment in form for us, because it's really where if we took a chicken egg and we started adding clay onto it to sculpt John's head, this would be the moment of departure off of the egg, where we would sprout off with the beard, and it would no longer follow the egg logic of the head. So the egg logic of the head is ending right here in this case, and that's where the beard really attaches to the egg and departs in terms of its unique form. So let's be aware of that, the egg delving under. Let's take a little, just to finish up this chapter of the demo, let's take a look at our center line. We know that law number 1 of our laws is always draw the center line all the way through. So that means we want to map it out all the way from top to bottom. Law number 2, do not over-center the center line. So it's very easy for us to take that center line and accidentally pull it this way a little bit. So check your drawing to see if that's happening. Very often it happens just a small amount, like the nose belongs here, but we draw the center line here. And so we get a distortion on the drawing. It's the kind of distortion where we're not sure what's going on, but we know something's not right. And law number 3, the center line is complex. The center line is not an ambiguous, line, and is also not a curve. I guess I switched those around. So law number 1 is always draw the center line. Law number 2, the center line is complex. It's not a straight line, nor is it an ambiguous curve. Law number 3, do not over-center the center line. So we're going to take a quick analysis. So very lightly, I'm going to draw what I assess the center line to be doing on the form. And so I'm using the center line as a topographical line. I mean, we could actually see this happen in real life. If we were to take, imagine taking a mascara pencil and just drawing a perfectly straight line down the middle of our model's faces. There would now be a black line on their face. And we would draw that line as part of the drawing if that were the case. Or what if he had his face painted and there happened to be a line straight down the middle? That would be very useful for us to analyze structure. So notice the mustache really projects forward and outward because it's so full and volumetric. And it's almost like we have to map what happens now. We have to cut back and in on the mustache, where we would arrive at the front of the top of the middle of the lip. And then the middle of the lip would be a downward facing plane even further back. So look at the big jumps in center line here. Center line is way out here on the nose, and then it projects forward with the mustache. Then it's going to cut back as the mustache has an under-facing plane. That's when it first encounters the lip, and then the lip itself is going to cut back because it's a downward-facing plane. Okay, then we're going to see a gap in the mouth. Let's do a little bit of mapping the angles of the mouth for a moment, just tentatively. Punctuation for the bottom of the lip. Now the lower lip is an upward facing plane. So we're going to see that facing up and correlating to where the center line left off from above. And then here the center line is difficult to appraise because it's going to be puffed out due to the beard and starts to take on a more organic, kind of lost nature down the the fullness of the beard. The beard kind of loses bilateral symmetry once we drop below the lower lip. It moves into a more asymmetrical form. So we feel like this side of the beard is flowing out more. This side is straighter. And there's unique patterns on this side that don't play out on this side. So we can sort of cease the centerline analysis once we hit about this point or maybe this point. But it's just good to take a moment to check in with what the centerline is doing spatially and structurally, so that we don't lose a sense of the structure and volume of the portrait. Okay, so as I go to end this phase, I just take my brush and softly brush it down to ghost it out. And the lines all get a little bit lighter and foggier. And they are really receptive to the next round of revisions that will take place. All right, thanks a lot. I'll see you on the next step.